Just diagnosed with lymphocytic colitis. Was told by a prominent doctor it has nothing to do with gluten. On budesonide for 2 months. Notice lymphocytic colitis isn't mentioned much. What are your thoughts? Lymphocytic colitis is definitely caused by gluten. I've seen a number of cases go completely into remission by changing diet. So if you are working with a prominent doctor who's denying that nutrition has anything to do with lymphocytes infiltrating into your colon, I mean, what is another reason lymphocytes would infiltrate into your colon? You could have an infection. I don't know if he's ruled that out, so you might ask him or talk to him to rule out any type of microbial imbalance within your colon that might be leading to that colitis. But outside of an infection or microbial imbalance, really the only thing that generally tends to lead to lymphocytes infiltrating into your colon, what are lymphocytes? They're immune cells that are designed to help protect you from something that's there, right? So what you're putting in your mouth is the only thing that ends up in your colon. And so we have to look at food first. Any GI doctor who says food's not part of it, in my opinion, is if it were my doctor, I'd run away. I'd run away and call him a charlatan because that's just nonsense. But again, maybe you've got a good doctor, maybe you just haven't had a deep enough conversation. Hard to say. So Lindsay's asking, can we set up a distributor in the UK for our different gluten-free supplementation? Lindsay, if you've got a distributor you want to connect my team with, be happy to. We've looked at doing this a number of times and it's tended to fall through. So if you've got a distributor in mind, we'd be happy to communicate with them. Let's see here. Hi, Dr. Osborne. What can cause a leaky bladder all day long? Could this be gluten sensitivity from muscle weakness, or what else can cause this? Lots of things can cause that, Laura. Leaky bladder could be that you have weak pelvic floor muscles. Leaky bladder, that could mean that you have an infection or a microbial imbalance within your bladder. So those are really probably two of the more common ones I would suggest that you look into first. But the other thing we'll see sometimes, like a PT with an expertise in pelvic floor, sometimes just doing the right exercises to strengthen the muscles around your pelvic floor can really help with that. And that's an area that you might consider starting first if you're not having symptoms of urinary tract infection, which would be like burning or pain of urination. Also sometimes see leaky bladder occur in people with oxalate issues as well. Let's see. Nicole's asking, how can I lower liver enzymes? AST is 57, ALT is 103, both are high. I also have Hashimoto's and fibromyalgia. So if you're trying to lower your enzymes for your liver, so understand that it's not an issue of lowering your enzymes per se. It's an issue of finding out why your enzymes are high. So again, I'm going to skip this slide for just a minute. We'll come back to it. The first question you have to ask is, why are they high? Why are your liver enzymes elevated in the first place? What would cause elevation of liver enzymes? For many people, if you're not drinking alcohol is a big one. Gluten is a huge one. We see this all the time. I mean, they're aside from the fact that in my clinic where I see people's fatty liver diseases reverse on the regular, there's a lot of published medical research and studies on the relationship between gluten-induced liver damage. And so if you're not on a true gluten-free diet, that might be one of the issues. Excessive carbs can also be part of the problem. We'll see this a lot in people, excessive carbohydrate diets. And so some people will go keto for a short time and they'll watch their liver enzymes drop. And so you may be consuming too much carbs. What's too much carbs? Generally speaking, 33% of your total calories should be carbohydrate. If you're at 40%, 50%, 60%, you're probably overeating carbohydrate on a regular basis. And this could even be from healthy carbs. So like fruit's a healthy carb. A number of vegetables are healthy carbs. But again, you could be overdoing it and that could be contributing to it, because what too many carbs do is they drive up triglycerides. Triglycerides are fat. Your body takes excessive carb, converts it into triglycerides, and then it takes those triglycerides and shoves them into the liver, and that creates fatty liver. and then you end up with elevated liver enzymes as a result of that potential process. Something else that can cause it, that I see very commonly, is yeast overgrowth. And one of the reasons why yeast can actually be a source of alcohol when you have excessive carbs in the diet. So excessive carbs plus yeast produces alcohol, damages the liver. That's a possibility. And another one that I commonly see, so let's say you're gluten-free, you don't drink alcohol, your carbohydrates are under great control, you're on a keto diet, and you don't have a yeast overgrowth. Another very, very common finding that I'll see is a person has a mold issue, mold toxicity. And some of the mold toxins, the mycotoxins, can actually damage your liver and can lead to elevations in liver enzymes. Now, outside of that, you may be taking prescription medications. Many of the medications are processed by the liver, processed through the liver, and so you got to be cautious there. If you haven't had your water tested, sometimes there are chemical components in the water. In the Houston area where I live, there's 42 different prescription medications identifiable in our water after the city's done filtering it. You know, what your water looks like depends on where you live. You might look at testing your water, but these are all things that you need to investigate first. Now, if all these things are fine and good, then generally what happens to liver enzymes is they start dropping. And you don't have to do anything. You just have to figure out why it's happening. That's the amazing thing about your body, is that it heals. You know, what some people would tell you to do is take a liver formula. I mean, and I have a liver formula. We have something called Ultra Liver Detox, and it's got a number of different key ingredients that are very beneficial to the liver. They support the liver's ability to do its job. But if you don't figure out where the damage is coming from, again, this is number one rule, is that you do not retox. And so you got to find out why the liver's taking on excessive damage. You can't just throw supplementation or support at the liver and expect you're going to resolve that problem long term. You're just going to be putting a Band-Aid over it. Do night sweats and hot flashes in early menopause count as sweating? Hey, they do, yes. If you're sweating through the hot flashes, yes, it definitely counts. I like this. Charlotte's commenting on what I said earlier. Armpits smell like onion and garlic. That's not uncommon to see that when people are really doing a good detox, is that sweat will really smell. Why do some people sweat so much more than others? I have to take a lot of electrolytes when I exercise because I just pour sweat anytime it's warm out. Well, some people have different metabolic rates than others. We all have our own metabolic machinery, and some people are more prone in sweat easier. I'm the perfect example of if I'm not aggressively exercising, I'm not going to sweat really much at all. I'm a harder to sweat person. Now, there are some people that just don't sweat. We see that a lot in people that are overburdened with too many toxins, as their sweating mechanism actually shuts down, and that as we get them better and better and better, they actually start sweating again. But as a general rule, there's not like, why does one person sweat more than the other? It just has to do with your uniqueness. And, you know, unfortunately, if you're a heavy sweater and you didn't want to be, that's kind of like saying, I wish I had blue eyes instead of brown, or brown eyes instead of blue. It's just, there are certain aspects to our physiology that we can't control. Let's see here. What would be the cause of bloating without eating beans? I mean, that's such an open-ended question, because there's 1,000 things that could cause bloating. You could have a digestive damage to your GI tract where you're not producing adequate digestive enzymes. Your pancreas might be underperforming. Those are two probably pretty simple places to start. You could also be a person that's underproducing stomach acid, and so with low stomach acid, a lot of times your food's not digesting, and your food ferments and it creates gas, and then you bloat. So, look to digestion first, but really look to things that hinder digestion or that could assault your digestion. Should we filter the bath water? Does it not really matter as long as you use it? No, you should filter the bath water. If you're going to take that deep Epsom salt bath, definitely you should filter your water. I mean, I recommend it if you're watching this and you don't have a whole house water filter, especially if you live in the city, you definitely want to filter that water. Now, if you're on a well somewhere out in the country and you've had your water tested and it's pretty clean, or if your well is hundreds of feet deep, remember, you've got the best filter in the world, which is hundreds of feet of earth. That's a fantastic filter, better than any filter we can produce as man, carbon filters or KDF filters. So, but yes, I definitely recommend that you filter your bath water as well. So question coming in, how much of what my white willow formula is, it's got white willow bark in it. How much would I recommend taking daily if a doctor suggested me to use aspirin therapy to avoid stroke? I would simply challenge the notion of taking an aspirin to avoid stroke because, or heart attack, because now the studies are coming out that there's really not a huge benefit to taking it to reduce your risk. So I would just talk with your doctor and challenge that notion in the first place. Again, there are better things to use to keep blood viscosity from being aggressively clotted. And so again, I gave you a number of them, but antioxidants, vitamin C, vitamin E, magnesium, nattokinase, proteolytic enzymes, all are beneficial. If you want to do stronger, you can take ginkgo biloba, which can also naturally thin the blood. But I think those are better options even than white willow. And the reason why is white willow is relatively benign, but it's a natural form of acetylsalicylic acid, which, one of the long-term problems with aspirin, including white willow, is it causes a degradation of the mucus lining in your stomach and intestines. And so you don't want to just use it indefinitely. It's designed to use acutely and not designed to stay on forever, just in case. Because again, you end up paying a risk ratio of what happens when your GI tract lining starts to slowly deteriorate over time, as it can pose other kinds of risks for you. What's my feeling on beets for the blood? I think if your blood sugar is under control and you're eating real beets and not like a processed beet-like substance for your blood, as far as it's not so much for your blood as I like beets for vasodilation. The beets actually help really and strongly dilate your blood vessels. And a lot of people, as they age, their blood vessels become more rigid. And so beets help your body to produce a chemical called nitric oxide, which is very dilatory of your blood vessels, so it can open them up and improve your blood flow. How much vitamin E? Depends on the person, but generally anywhere from 400 to 800 international units is a good place to start. What do you think about ion cleanse? Foot baths for detoxification, I know a lot of people swear by them. I'm just not a big fan of those. Not because I don't think they may not work for a person, but because there's no great scientific research on them. And I'm more of an objective science guy than I am just try this because other people say it works. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do things anecdotally, but before I make a broad spectrum recommendation, I want to make sure that there's some real research behind it. In a lot of these detox foot baths, I've seen people, I get people all the time coming to my clinic that have been on those things for years and they're still struggling and they're not any better. So I just, again, number one rule of detox is not which gadget or gidget or supplement you can take. It's why is there a toxicity issue and what can you do to fix the holes in your boat, not necessarily what can you do to row closer to shore and have your boat still sink before you get there. Let's see here. Cheapest way to test for mold. The cheapest way to test for mold is probably, if you're talking about mold in your body, it's not mold in your body. So to be clear, your question has multiple layers. The cheapest way to test for mold in your body, so there's a lot of different ways. So understand what mold is, first of all. Mold could be yeast. So like Candida is an example of a type of yeast, but you can also have external environmental mold growing in your body. For example, you could have aspergillus growing in your lungs. You could have mold growing underneath your toenails, right? And you don't need a test to see mold, that big, thick, white growth underneath the nail bed. You've got mold growing on your body when that is the case. But it's hard to see it in the lungs. If you're asthmatic or if you've got mold in your environment and you're having a hard time breathing, for that type of test, usually like going to your pulmonologist and having a culture sputum, where they do a culture on the sputum that you spit up. Usually they give you a device you blow into and it helps to rattle your chest and bring mucus up out of your chest, and then they get that mucus and they culture it. Now, that type of test requires holding onto the culture for several weeks, and the problem with that is a lot of doctors will only try to culture it for a few days and then they'll throw the culture away. But it can take mold weeks to actually grow in culture. So you've got to make sure you've got a doctor who knows who knows that and who's doing that test right. There's cultures that can be done of the GI tract because you can have yeast that grows in the GI tract. There's cultures that can be done of the sinus cavities because you can have mold growing in your sinus cavities. So if you're talking about identifying mold growing inside of you, there's a lot of different types of tests. They're all relatively expensive. So there's not like a cheap way. Now, if you're talking about mold toxins, meaning the toxins that mold produces, there are urine tests that can be run to measure for the presence of those mold toxins. But that, again, having the presence of mold toxins doesn't necessarily mean they have mold growing inside of you. It could be that you're living in a moldy home and being exposed to these mold toxins through the air. That's just they're different things. And so again, that question, it's got a lot of layers to it. And so we're going to be talking a lot this year about mold. So just stay tuned and keep tuning in, and we may get you better answers along the way. It's better in-depth answers, but I don't have time to get into all of that tonight. Is bentonite clay good for detox? Can be, but again, going back to what's good for detox, I mean, bentonite clay, charcoal can be good. Zeolite is a great binding agent. It depends on the kinds of toxins that you have. If you're trying to detox your liver, for example, bentonite clay is not the best choice. If you're trying to, cleanse your colon, bentonite clay could be a pretty good choice. So it just depends on what area you're trying to really effectively have detoxification on as well. I love this. Marcus says, good evening. Glad to have your vast knowledge on celiac and gluten sensitivity. Being corn sensitive, I'm starting to get better after decades of not knowing corn as a gluten. I love to hear that. Thanks for that feedback, Marcus. Maybe somebody else listening to this is hearing that for the first time. And if you are, and you didn't know that corn had gluten, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Grab your copy of No Grain, No Pain and get started on the 30-day diet. Because if you've got celiac as a diagnosis and you've continued to struggle, it's probably because you never really truly went gluten-free. Do I recommend an enema for cleaning out the bowels? Sometimes yes and sometimes no. It just depends on the situation. What's a good dose of s-acetyl glutathione? A good dose, if just for general like liver and health and support, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 milligrams a day, depending on your size, is reasonable to take without creating too much of a ruckus. Is it true that the way we breathe determines how alkaline and acidic we are? In part, but it's not the only thing. I mean, there are a lot of things that determine the pH. And remember, the pH, a lot of people oversimplify pH. They shoot for always saying alkaline, alkaline, alkaline. But the different areas of your body have different pHs. Your stomach has a pH of 2. Your GI tract should have a pH of about 6.5. Your blood has a pH of about 7.5 or so. So different areas have different pHs, and so don't get caught up so much in focusing on how you can always be alkaline. I think there's a lot of we'll just say misleading conceptions about that. If dill pickles have mustard seed in the processing, would this be contraindicated for a grain-free diet? No, mustard seed's fine. If IgA for anti-gliadin is elevated, does that confirm gluten sensitivity? No, it confirms gliadin sensitivity, Suzanne. Gliadin is found in wheat, barley, and rye. Gluten, there are many different types of gluten. There are hundreds of different types of gluten. Gliadin is only one of those types. So an anti-gliadin antibody test confirms that you're reacting to gliadin specifically found in wheat, barley, and rye. Are medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane still considered a nightshade? I am reactive to nightshades. No, lion mane is not a nightshade. I don't know where you heard that, but that's wrong. So whoever told you that misled you. So yeah, you're okay with lion mane if that's something that you want to consume. Did you have a specific brand recommendation for the light to help improve the circadian rhythm system? So yeah, sunlight. The brand is called Earth Brand. And if you just go outside of your house, you're going to soak it in and it won't even cost you any money at all. Let's see. autophagy, is that good for detox? What is the minimum time needed to turn it on? You turn on autophagy in 24 hours. So if you're going to do fasting and you're trying to activate autophagy or autophagy, you can turn that on within 24 hours of a good fast. Now, there are different benefits the longer you go, but then you hit a certain point where you don't want more autophagy. You want to start healing and repairing and renourishing your body. So, I mean, for most people, as a general rule of thumb, most people don't need to go longer than 3 days if you're trying to do like a more aggressive fast. And some people do up to 7, but if you're doing intermittent fasting on a regular basis, you're going to get autophagy on a regular basis from that. If organic isn't available, but an item suggests non-GMO, how valuable is that? It depends, Diane. I would call the manufacturer of the company and ask them, where do you source your product? Because the non-GMO, in my opinion, the non-GMO label, how many times do you think the company that makes money off that label actually goes out and investigates the farm where that product, or the company where that product is being produced? I mean, I use non-GMO on some of my products. We have the label, but you know how many times we've been investigated by the non-GMO people? We've not. So I don't trust those people with those labels because they don't do the job that they're claiming that they do. It's more like lip service. And so, like in our product line, we actually do in-house testing. And that's why I can feel confident about saying what we say about our products, because we do in-house testing. We do in-house testing. The product comes to us and there can be all kinds of claims made about the raw ingredients, but we do our own in-house testing to make sure they're not liars, so that we catch anybody who is lying and we send that garbage back to them and we quit using them as a supplier. But most companies don't have that type. I shouldn't say most. Many companies don't have that type of integrity. So you have to be really careful. I don't trust a lot of the non-GMO stuff, and really the organic stuff, in my opinion, is becoming less and less trustable. I'd say your best bet is really to find a great farmer's market in your area, or a great food co-op where you're buying from local farmers that you can actually talk to, shake their hand, have a conversation with them about what they're growing and how they're growing it. To me, that knowing where your most valuable resources are coming from directly, and knowing the people that provide them, to me, provides you with a great and valuable insight versus buying from a mass conglomeration company who may or may not be honest in their dealings with you. 10 days, no caffeine. I love it, Lee says. 10 days, no caffeine as per the Osborne protocol. Good, so moving in the right direction. Can a very itchy back indicate release of toxins, especially after sauna or at bedtime? It can. It absolutely can. Very itchy. You're getting a histamine response, most likely. And that, yes, it can absolutely indicate a release of toxins. Yeah, I can't get overheated due to MS. So if you've got multiple sclerosis, generally you're heat intolerant. And so in that particular type of situation, you're going to have a harder time with that sweating component until you get the MS under better control. And the MS can get under better control. I don't know what you've been told, Karen, but MS is an autoimmune disease. And again, we've talked about causation of autoimmune disease, but one of the biggest culprits in MS is gluten. Another big culprit is vitamin B12 and vitamin D deficiencies. So if you aren't on that road and on that track with no grain, no pain, I highly suggest you get there, because we see a lot of people with MS do really well and are capable of tolerating sunshine and heat again in their future. Let's see. Doing the 30-day challenge is from Lynn. Is chicory okay to use as coffee replacement? Yes, chicory is okay. Check it. Some brands of chicory contain wheat and barley. They contain like a barley sweetener. So just check the brand you're using. Not all brands do. It's an additive in some chicory coffees. So if you've got a clean chicory, it's perfectly fine on no grain, no pain. Why is there so much focus on calories, but very little focus on education on nutrition? I don't know. I don't want to answer that question and say that I know what the thought process behind the people that teach university level nutrition courses or doctorate level nutrition courses, what their intent is. But it's sad because we're stuck in, it's like being stuck in the dark ages and nutrition. Like we can move beyond the conversation of carbs, fats, and proteins, and eat candy to raise your blood sugar if you're diabetic. Like those are all moronic, ancient, antiquated thoughts that have been inundated into our society, and doctors don't study nutrition really at all, so they don't know any better to correct anyone for the most part. And again, if you're a registered dietitian, don't take offense to this if you're following me, but I mean, even in registered dietitian in their schooling, a big part of the focus is not on micronutrition, it's on macronutrients and weight management. And so, unless you're an RD or a doctor who's gone on beyond your graduate level training into postgraduate level training, it's just not something that's going to be taught in the mainstream. It's just sad. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.